Imagine you're out exploring, and you come across something that catches your eye a couple meters adjacent to your path. You walk a bit off trail to further investigate the item, but soon realize that it's buried in the ground. Would you dig it up? I mean, of course you would. Especially if it came in a cool ass little box like this. Hell yeah, man, what? But after opening it, your excitement is overcome by disappointment upon seeing the sole content within the box. An unmarked VHS tape. You stand there, thinking it over for a bit, and realize that there may have been a reason why it was buried. Someone likely didn't want you to see it. But what could it be? No, you should really put it back. Okay, you got me. Let's see what's on this bad boy. Yep, that's about what I'd expect from a mysterious ass VHS tape found buried within the woods. On October 5th, YouTube channel Alluvium uploaded a short video called An Introduction, sharing his discovery of a VHS tape. Later that day, he would go on to upload the first part of the contents of the tape, which was a test run of an unreleased game, Valle Verde. Valle Verde currently has 3 entries, including the introduction video, and looks to be a game similar in nature to Animal Crossing, as the playable character finds himself in a new town with many different animal inhabitants. The series presents itself as an ARG as we watch the tape along with the uploader and get an insight into the development of the game. In this video, I'll be going over the entries within the series, and at the end, as always, I'll be doing my best to explain the hidden meaning behind the Spooky Forest tape. So without further ado, my name's Nas, and let's explore. Valle Verde opens up with the original PlayStation boot-up sequence, dating the development of the game to, the earliest, late 1994. This is followed by what I can assume is the logo for a game studio, Onyxware, as well as the Shizuoka Institute of Science and Technology. After the introductory logos, we see this screen. All the information presented on the screen tells us that the contents of the VHS is not just simple gameplay footage, but an investigation of the game itself under the supervision of 2 men, Robert Saturn and Pablo Gutierrez. Under that, there's a report summary stating that the game has malfunctioning AI, corrupted learning data, an issue regarding the product's special hardware. Why there'd be an external investigation on an unreleased game is suspicious, and immediately raises some concerns of what is on the tape. Finally, we're loaded into the game when New Game is selected before a beautiful introduction animation plays. We see some type of flying contraption before being placed within the player and meet the first character, Roddy. Roddy seems like a very trustworthy and friendly man. I mean, who wouldn't trust a man with a mustache like that? The player enters Test 05 into the name prompt, which, that's no fun. You gotta get immersed, bro, come on. Roddy asks for some more documentation, which prompts the player to select which character they'll be playing as, selecting a male character and hastily setting the age to 10. Aw, what a cute innocent soul. Surely something so pure can't do anything to lose the grace of God. The animation scene continues as Roddy notices another plane cruising along next to the flying contraption, and we see it's this cool ass cat-like character. So far, the character design in this series is amazing. I love this little nefarious creature. He spins off into the clouds, transitioning into an establishing shot of where the player will be arriving at. Landing down, the character seems to be thrilled to have arrived into Debug Shima, and gives the player their first task of authenticating his documentation. Proceeding past the unhelpful welcome booth, we're finally introduced to the town center, where the player is able to meet with the mayor of the town, Foxo. You can tell he's the head honcho in these parts because he has a golden statue erect smack dab in the middle of town square. This says a lot about his character. Modest leaders are always the best kinds. Foxo introduces himself before the player shows him their paperwork, then receiving an ID card. Then he goes out of his way to talk about the armband he has on, mentioning that there's one for each tree of knowledge, and with hard work he can earn one as well. Immediately, you can see where this is going, right? Next, Foxo gives the player a place to stay. A run-down house still containing a few abandoned items from the previous owner, who Foxo says left a long time ago and never came back, which, Yeah, that is how moving works. Thank you, Foxo. He then takes us along to meet the other residents of the island. The first being Jang Sun from Georgia. As you can see here, the game seems to corrupt a bit when introducing the residents of the town, with each having a different visual. Along with Jang Sun, there's Kazuya from Japan, Oliver from Ireland, and Chloe from France. Chloe is surprisingly able to stick out from the others due to there being blood splattered around the front of the house. Along with this, the corruption during her introduction is far more drastic. For a split second, the entire background is taken up by a deep-fried version of her portrait before moving on to the final character, Matthias. Matthias is the only character actually shown out of the bunch, and it immediately makes you wish it hadn't. The expression of Matthias seems to be one of concern, as his sprite tries to leave the house, but rubber bands back to the front each time, before completely vanishing. The portrait of Matthias seems to be untouched, as there's a brief moment of awkward silence, and Foxo takes us back to the town center. Upon arriving back, the music picks up again, and Foxo decides that now is a great time to flex his 99-carat solid gold statue like we weren't just forced to look at the damn thing when we first got here, then casually mentions that the smiling one has given him absolute authority over this area. Remember that at the next elections, he asserts, which is kind of like his catchphrase. He says that a couple different times. It's kind of funny. The smiling one gave him absolute authority, but there's also elections, apparently, so no wonder why the first dude took off. They got this weird-ass government system, like an appointed dictatorship with elections for something. I don't know. I guess it makes more sense in the animal kingdom. Foxo requests to share one more piece of information with the player. That is, if you want more knowledge, to seek out Ito at the museum, as he's always looking for assistance for investigations. Then to visit Dr. Nickchou if you want to learn anything about robotics. Following this, Foxo shows his boundless generosity by giving the player 100 Fox dollars, telling him to remember that at the next elections. See? You thought I was being sarcastic. Nah man, he's a great leader. Wait, what? Why do you run up on them like that? Damn, he done put them into Fox coin debt. Fuck. But he's gonna have to be farming fruit to pay off this crippling debt for the next decade. Shit. So the player just accepts this and records it as an anomaly. Checking the map, the player is now at an unknown location away from the main hub that appears to have some type of biblical landmark. When looking around, we can see that there's some giant cake slices around, as audio of cans opening followed by pouring sounds play. The player proceeds to walk into the wall, which totally looks like there would be a barrier there, but there's not, and then is met with a similar area. This one has multiple statues with a single eye positioned in the center of what would be the face, along with the couple in the sky. Nope, no bugs or glitches here. Everything working as intended. When walking to the next area, cash register and money sounds immediately start playing, as we can see that there's piles of gold and a few odd paintings lying around. Strangely enough, there's a dumpster in this area with Michelangelo's David statue standing in it, and Titan's Christ carrying the cross leaning up against it. The next area initially appears to be empty aside from little vegetation around. I think that's what it is. Shit, I hope that's what it is. There's a low rumble that sounds like a heartbeat, along with baby babbling. The player walks forward before stopping when a pool of blood appears next to him. After that strange event, the player arrives at an area filled with TVs and vinyl players. One of these plays a song that slowly distorts along with the video, as the player proceeds before it abruptly corrects itself, and they enter the next area. Okay, these are definitely some silhouettes in a red area of some kind. Walking up to one of the figures makes the character begin to glow for some reason, but before we can see what happens, it moves away and he returns to normal. All the while he's in this area, some type of lecture plays in a low rumbling voice, which I assume comes from the big one standing in the middle with an eye.
And to impress him, takes on his multi-armed form and says,
Moving into the final area, we can see that the base level is green, but has patches of corruption scattered around the scene. Along with that, there's what I can assume are angel statues, each placed in front of a mirror. Continuing forward, there's a breath of relief as the sky lightens up, and there's a serene ambiance to the whole view now. The player is met with a ring of angel statues and an open gate allowing the character to pass through. At the end of the path, there looks to be some type of church, but before the player can explore the building, another anomaly occurs and Test 05 is teleported back into the town center. Walking directly into the market, we're introduced to— oh my lord! Three new characters, Rosa, Teresa, and Jacinta, who warmly welcome the new resident. Immediately they advocate for child labor, offering to pay 10 fox doubloons in exchange for making a product delivery to Bobson, which the player politely declines. After speaking to the woman, we see that Matthias is sitting in the corner and beckons the player over, asking for help. He seems to break the fourth wall, asking if they're with the agents before he begins to panic a bit. The playtester asks if he can see the text input bar, and Matthias confirms that he can, but states that he can't move. Immediately he establishes that he is aware that the game is under investigation by some type of agent, despite existing in the game as an NPC that's unable to make actions on his own accord. The player asks a few more questions which he refuses to answer, instead asking to speak to his mom, then to a man named Mr. Kunimochi. Before he can be told that the man he mentioned doesn't work with them anymore, Matthias says that he doesn't want to play anymore, and begins to beg to be let out. Following that, the footage jumps and Test 05 is once again at the church. Within the church, there's a man standing around the back, a priest giving a sermon to a room filled with nobody. What he says is from a poem simply called Lovely Lady Dressed in Blue. We're here to test the game though, so his prayer is cut short as the player walks up to him, pressing the interaction button. The man is named Pietro and ominously states that he should not have taught his watch the secrets of Joseph Cupertino. Right after that, the footage jumps to the character in the town hub again. The player goes to an aerial view and positions the camera over the Foxo statue. Then it begins to do something strange, something diabolical. While Foxo is not looking, the statue motionlessly shifts into a new position, standing on all fours, more closely resembling the animal he's based on. Though the weirdest part is that he now appears to have some type of horns on the top of his head. The video abruptly cuts again, this time jumping right before the player is about to enter a plane minigame. This sequence is recorded as an object generation anomaly. Some funky ass music plays as the cat adjacent character, who we learn is named Kato, comes to introduce us to the minigame. The player successfully drops one delivery into the drop off zone, then gets bored apparently, and just flies past this low effort Statue of Liberty, completely avoiding the second target. Following this, the video once again shifts back into the town. Damn. Really must be something cool going on in this town if it randomly keeps starting the player back here. Oh, no way, there is! Look, they're going into a secret club or something. Yeah, go ahead and follow them. Yep, just like that. That's exactly how they did it. Perfect. Okay, maybe it wasn't a club. What I should have said was cult. Behind the buildings in the town is a strange triangular shaped door surrounded by stone pillars. The gateway has the words Egalite, Fraternite, and Liberté. From what I understand after looking into these words, it's a French phrase meaning liberty, equality, and fraternity. Passing through the threshold, Test 05 finds himself in a desolate land covered in a suffocating layer of fog. After looking back towards the gate that is now inactive, the player looks back and sees that there are now multiple wolf statues. Walking to the center of the group, there looks to be an outline of an animal resembling a sheep laid flat onto the ground. Oh shit, sorry. I looked away, what happened? Test 05 is knocked out and text appears on the screen saying to turn on the console on March 22nd, 1997. Might be a little too late for any of us to do that, but I'm sure whatever happened on March 22nd, 1997 was awesome and not disturbing at all. Following this, it cuts back to a more normal looking area. The anomaly report doesn't even bother to summarize what happened. It says to refer to the full report. This is when the character himself asks the player if he's hungry, and to look over to the left. Walking up to a tree, Test 05 begins to sound quite dubious, trying his damnedest to convince the player to eat whatever it is that's on the ground. Eating the fruit seems to trigger some type of negative consequence, as in the game an unseen character simply called the accuser speaks to the player before a distorted face flashes on screen. Suddenly, Test 05 is transported back to the gate, with the angel statues out in front, and we hear sharp jagged breathing. Turning around, we see, oh, something light, just a biblically accurate angel. After sizing it up, the player tries to walk through the gate, and without hesitation, the angel smites the character and I'm sorry, that wasn't funny. The angel smites the character down and his face distorts, even sounding like he's screaming out in pain before the screen turns black. When the game loads back up, the character is now in an area completely covered in molten rock. Off to the side, there seems to be a statue similar in appearance to the weird Foxo statue. The one character in this area is a corrupted Ito, the museum owner. He rambles on about the museum, then says that the smiling one asked him to collect 10 faces for the carnival, then asking for the player's assistance. Right after he does, a prompt pops on the screen warning us that the auto-generated tasks can present problems and destabilize the system, which is something that was mentioned in the initial report at the start, so of course he has to accept that and see what's up. After wandering around, he discovers Matthias's house somehow partially infused into the side of the wall. Upon entering the house, the player analyzes a stack of paper on the drawer, and we see that it's a bunch of drawings by Argentine artist Benjamin Solari Paravicini. I'm not able to fully understand what these mean, but I do know that they come from a collection of work put together as a book called Prophecies of Benjamin Solari Paravicini. I'll touch on that later because there's a lot to talk about with it. Walking into the only bedroom within the house, the player analyzes the paintings on the wall. The first one being the infant Saint John the Baptist. The second one I can't find the source painting of, but when zooming in on it, it seems that the painting within the game is modified, with the eyes of the figure presented crying blood. The final painting is called Divine Mercy and is a simple painting portraying Jesus Christ. At least it was before it came to life and glows the holy light that overtakes the whole frame. Then a voice belonging to the man in front of you, likely referring to Ahem, tells the player that he's carrying a huge burden on his shoulders, before giving him the item Divine Mercy, sharing the name of the portrait. Then, the man in front of you tells the player to visit where his body lies, before part 1 of Valle Verde ends. Part 2 of Valle Verde opens up with the player character stepping outside of his garage, that he still hasn't reorganized. He must have done some grinding off screen because ain't no way, how did he get rid of all his debt? Checking his inventory, you can see that he still possesses the Divine Mercy that was obtained at the end of part 1. Jumping back to the front of the gate with the angel, the Divine Mercy is presented, and this pleases the angel so much, it turns into a small door, offering a way in. This angel is one of spite though, because the door is 2 sizes too small for the character to fit through. Womp womp. The player returns back to the secret passageway, which he promptly squeezes through, and is brought back to the Live Laugh Love door. This time around, the ground has a checkered pattern, with a couple of giant chess pieces around that take turns moving onto different squares. The triangle gate once again leads to Silent Hill, except this time the map is opened. There are 5 different biomes in this world: the Alpha Zone, Charlie Zone, Oscar Zone, Kilo Zone, and Juliet Zone. The aerial tool function is used, and the player looks around, and a villainous-ass creature flies past the frame. The camera follows him for a bit, until a golden mask catches the eye of the player. Inspecting the object reveals it to be some type of NPC creature, originating from an Angel Quest demo. So I guess this is an angel, but to me it kinda looks like a gargoyle goblin hybrid. I think that would be much cooler, but Angel is alright, I guess it's whatever. Exiting that screen, there's some weird ass creatures absorbing the angel's textures, leaving it void of any color. Bro, what was that one? These guys want attention so badly, I swear. Always running past the screen and shit. This guy specifically must be the blob of unfathomable despair, because he knocks out the character again, with the text telling the player to turn on the console on March 22nd, 1997 popping up yet again. The next scene shows us this new character, named Posafa, who is some kind of art gallery organizer. He tells us a little about how buying art works, and suggests to take a look at the piece La File de la Luminaire Rose, saying it's the museum's most prized piece. A spontaneous level generation anomaly is recorded, then the player goes to interact with the piece mentioned, and asks to further examine the art. Posafa seems to be slightly offended by the request, taking his sweet ass time to answer, then eventually quietly saying sure. What follows is probably the strangest sequence in the series so far. It prompts some type of cutscene where the camera floats into the painting, transitioning into the fog area, and we see this demonic woman bound to a rock who repeatedly gets stabbed by a 3,000-degree knife from behind her. Text on the screen appears during this sequence, though I don't think it's coming directly from this character. It reads, "Lost to the eyes of time, struck by the echoes of lament, fragmented in the gloom of pain. There lies the betrayer's fate, but could the belly of the earth bear those who were daggers in life? Grant them distance for humanity to become a lost concept, a disfigured one. Now, sharp words only erode the endless void. They bounce, get lost in the thick fog. They no longer fall on loving ears, daggers buried in the forge, away from the burden and the suffering backs, adverse to love, to families, to nations. Faithful to their world, messiahs of their own cause, apostates of purity. He who witnesses their actions will see justice fall upon their wicked ways. But he will not be the only witness. Judgment of judgments at the end." After the last line, the humanoid bellows one last cry before being sealed away behind a door of molten rock. Briefly, Posafa asks if the player's interested in the piece. Do you even have to ask? I would love to have a painting of infinite torture in my home. I think it would look great right above my bed. But before we can see him answer, the tape cuts back to the front of the gate with the tiny door. The tool assist menu is opened back up, this time being used to shrink down the character's model size, so he can fit through the door. Upon entering the holy ground again, Pietro is standing out front to greet the player, saying, "We were waiting for you." He takes the character inside and says that what he's about to witness is only for his eyes, and not to share the information with anyone. Strangely, instead of addressing the player as Test 05, Pietro makes it apparent that he's speaking directly to the player Pablo, which if you remember, Pablo was one of the investigation supervisors. Adding another layer of the oddity, Pietro doesn't look at the character model, but directly at the camera instead. Now a new voice speaks to Pablo, referred to as Hoc est Verum, Latin for "this is true." The voice says "peace be with you," before abruptly being cut off with static and a black screen. Pietro leaves us with a few more clear and not vague at all lines, saying that its dissemination will be left in our hands, and that he'll grow a routine that will help with this objective. Finally, he gives us an item to deliver to Matthias, claiming that it's urgent. The game calls it a compass, but it's clearly a rosary. The video jumps back to the market in the middle of a conversation with Rosa, then backing out of the dialogue to approach Matthias. Though instead of giving him the rosary, the screen flashes and he's completely absorbed into it. Another few days pass between the recordings, displaying an irregular AI interaction anomaly report. The player opens the tool assist menu, this time opening up what I believe is a fast travel menu. The one selected is a jumble of changing text that leads him to a dark void with transparent gray boxes, with an unknown symbol on them. The player walks forward a bit before the camera snaps and fixes on a sprite slightly out of view with a single spotlight over it. Walking up to the figure reveals an uncanny visage of a man smiling at us. Upon speaking with the figure, a text box appears labeling it as "not." In the chat box, the player enters /info and Not asks what information he needs. He tries to ask Not a few questions, but he seems to struggle to understand Pablo, asking him to speak Spanish. He confirms that his name is Not and avoids answering any questions about other characters and names mentioned thus far. Pablo asks if he's able to describe what exactly he is, and Not responds by saying he's been wondering the same thing, and states, "I've hoped you'd have the answers that I was looking for." He tries to ask Not what he means by "you," but he shows a level of not only self-awareness, but frightening learning capabilities, saying that he's overheard others refer to the player character as agents in many different languages, and is able to infer what that means. Pablo confronts him on this, saying that he thought he could only speak Spanish. He confirms that fact, and further explains that he was forced to get rid of the other languages from his databank, then adds, "Their screams were insufferable. I could not bear to understand their pleas for help." Not says that the purpose of being in such a desolate area was not to be found, and when asked why, he says that it's because they tried to make him a subject of ceremony, just like all the children. He shows another level of sentience when he displays his ability to memorize information, such as the word agent in different languages, even after having them removed from his data, through the repetition of hearing the word. He vaguely describes his earliest memory, then explains that the shape he currently has is one he manifested to be more suitable to the feeling of said memory, and adds this form gives him enough confidence to interact with others. Pablo tries to press him about an unseen event that followed his creation, but he refuses to answer and then shuts down. The footage jumps back to another uncategorized anomaly on March 12th, where the next recording picks up. As the player walks into the library, A new character is introduced and he asks what he can help with. The player hits him with the /info and he begins to tell him about the Valle Verde archives, then details about local files, including the debug Shima and 2 new ones called Umi no Machi and Mori no Machi local libraries. The player requests to enter the files for Mori no Machi and goes to the game selection, selecting one titled Tharsis the Legend, another PlayStation 1 game. When the logos flash on screen, we're once again met with the SIST logo before the introduction plays. We're given another gorgeous fully animated opening cutscene, just like the one seen in Valle Verde, with a slightly different art style to match the game, but still has the grittiness associated with the age. Even though it's in Japanese, I'm still kinda getting into it. It kinda resembles Ghost in the Shell, even having a similar logo. He's brought to a character selection screen and chooses Ava, and enters the game. Another animated cutscene plays, this time with subtitles introducing the player to the task at hand. Their facility seems to have an unknown intruder currently in the air ducts, making its way towards the storage unit. They prepare to take it down, but something unexpected happens, and it bursts through the wall and begins to thrash all of the people stationed there. Right after this happens, there's a warning message that appears on screen, saying that the TH Brain device is experiencing connectivity problems, which could cause intermittent disruptions, followed by an old image of a rundown building that overcomes the background for a couple frames. The game resumes normally after this, and Ava rushes out to go assist with the intruder. The level loads up and the warning pops up again, right before the game seems to fully corrupt and Tharsis seems to merge with Valle Verde. The camera shifts into a perspective of an unseen entity, watching Ava make her way to the Fortress of the Damned. We watch as a horror beyond my comprehension lets out a chilling cry and emerges from the fog. It tenses up before hurling out one of those translucent larva monsters that lands on Ava and begins feeding on her. Unable to shake it off, she loses all color in her model, before the game has a critical error and crashes. Cutting to another recording with a complex data anomaly report on March 14th, the footage starts out in front of Matthias's house again. It looks the same as it did in the previous part, even flipping through the same book. But this time there's a new illustration within the book, portraying a cloaked figure with a scythe through its lower body. When viewing this image, the music stops playing and the TV turns on automatically. The remainder of the video is this broadcast called The Chaos of Man and the Chaos of God. Essentially what it says is, as mankind gets chaotic, so does the wrath of God in response to bring balance to the earth. A specific instance mentioned comes from the book of Genesis, when Abraham pleads with God to spare the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. After mentioning this, the new image found within the book flashes on the screen before it swiftly resumes. The narrator states that an earth without righteous punishment will only lead to destruction. Then another image flashes on screen, this time being a photo of a group of suits standing around a desk. He speaks on the subject of righteous punishment and states that modern man's inventions will discuss the heavens, but will not be a match of what they'll arrive with in return on the day of judgment, the chaos of God. After the speech, a visual of the third impact plays as a meteor lands on Earth, and from it a divine being rises, ending the video. Valle Verde still has a lot of unanswered questions and missing context. With it being so early in the series, I truly don't think there's a way to decipher exactly what's going on. There's not even a hint at what events occurred on seemingly important dates mentioned within the video. With what little we're given so far, we can, however, identify some meaning behind what we see within the footage and kind of set it to the side for when it does get updated. Within the game, there are many obvious biblical allusions shown throughout the runtime. The first we see is when the character walks through 7 areas, each with different objects and an overall tone found within it. These areas each represent one of the 7 sins commonly associated with Christianity. The cake and soda sounds display gluttony, the statues with an eye trained on the character displays envy, the room filled with gold and artwork displays greed. In this room, the player actually picks up some of the gold, but then sets it back down, which does have a point that I'll touch back on in a bit. The next room may get a bit sensitive in nature, but I believe this one is supposed to be lust, represented in the form of abortion. The next area has a lot of records and TVs lying around. that even slow the player down as he tries to walk past them, displaying sloth. Then there's a room of a few silhouettes cowering while an audio recording of Robert Oppenheimer, the creator of the atomic bomb, plays, displaying wrath.
Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu.
The final area shows corrupted statues staring into a mirror, which displays pride. All of this eventually led to a church protected by a gate. The different areas are all temptations for sin. As I'm sure you know, sinners aren't allowed through the gates of heaven. The player picks up the gold, showing that at any point he could have given in to the temptation, but luckily sets it back down, which allows him to pass through the gates initially. This is later put to the test yet again, when the character himself seems to ask if the player is hungry, and suggests that he eats the fruit from the tree of knowledge. The player consumes a piece of fruit from the base of the tree, and immediately an unseen person labeled as the accuser begins to speak to him, saying that he's already cooked and might as well shovel as much fruit down his throat as he can. The accuser here likely refers to the devil himself, being one of his many names within the Bible. So similar to the source tale, the devil whispers sinful suggestions into the ears of the player, causing him to eat from the tree of knowledge, then tries to plant into his mind that he's past the point of salvation. One thing is for sure though, there is indeed a cherubim guarding the gate of the Holy Land, and he does not rock with the sinners, so he cuts him right the fuck down using the slice of immeasurable pain and endless suffering. Then, not so much as an illusion, but the manifestation of Christ himself appears in Matthias' house and gives the player an item called Divine Mercy, telling him to visit where his body lies. This item forgives him of his sin and once again allows him to pass through the gate. The final thing I would like to highlight when drawing connections between Valle Verde and religion is Pietro himself, the only person you find past the gate guarded by the angel. When Pietro is shown speaking with the player for the first time, there's a little flame ignited above his head. Oftentimes the presence of God within the Bible is represented by a flame, with the fire of God typically appearing during tests or refinement of one's faith and resolve. Along with this, Pietro looks directly at the camera and addresses the player by his first name. This is incredibly strange given that the AI controlling the game makes it apparent that it doesn't even know his name, only referring to him as an agent. What I'm getting at is, like the accuser, Pietro is somehow able to interact with the game, and in supernatural ways at that. All of this information leads me to believe that Pietro is a divine figure, likely being God himself taking form within the game. Now that I have all that out of the way, let's discuss key details and events shown within the footage. Starting with one of the very first scenes we see, the report summary screen. We see multiple instances of malfunctioning AI and corrupted learning data, but something that's not explicitly pointed out within the video is the issues with the specialized hardware. I think the special hardware is referenced in this initial loading screen that asks the player not to unplug the TH Brain device. We're given no information explicitly saying what this device does, however it is confirmed that it was developed by the Shizuoka Institute of Science and Technology. As their logo is visible at the bottom of the debug menu, it can be inferred that it's some type of external hardware created for the PlayStation, clearly being differentiated from the console in the summary report screen. The next thing I would like to talk about is the strange NPCs found within the game, as well as not, the game's AI itself. There's a few residents in the town introduced to us who must be past users of the TH Brain, having real-world origins, names, and portraits. Matthias is the only character we see the model of, but in front of each house there's a shadow on the ground indicating that there is someone or something there. Matthias seems to have sentience, but not free will within the game. He's constantly moved around or forced to be in a specific location, and when questioned, answers with his own questions. He asks about Chloe, the person introduced right before him, and begs to be let out of the game. This could mean two things. One possibility is that somehow the minds of all the kids got transported into the game using the TH Brain. The other possibility is that it's able to copy their consciousness and use it to create an artificial intelligence, unaware that it isn't the original. I personally believe that the former is the case because at some point during the discussion, Nott states that he was trying not to be found, due to them trying to make him a subject of the ceremony, like the children. This to me means that something more sinister happened to the kids, rather than them just putting the headset on and their brains being downloaded. That in itself seems pretty unethical, but I'm thinking something even more diabolical. Honestly though, the extent of my theories on the sentient NPCs ends there. I don't think there's enough evidence to say for sure what role they play in all this quite yet. I mean, Matthias got absorbed into the rosary that was given to us by God, and that's the last it's touched on. Pocket Matthias. Not is another character of interest, likely being the one Foxo refers to as the smiling one. It doesn't seem to be malicious in nature, instead choosing to isolate itself from the horrifying events taking place within the game that seem like they aren't even in its control. Its own sentience is also a mystery to itself and expresses a curiosity in knowing why it's come to develop this level of intelligence. The way it describes itself and its experiences makes it sound displeased with its existence. Real quick, I'd like to talk about the barren Silent Hill looking area that's discovered by going through the triangle doorway found between the two buildings in the town. I think in some way, it's the catalyst for the corruption of the game, containing the most demonic looking entity revealed thus far, shown spawning the larval looking bug dudes who feed on parts of the game. Not to mention it has its own map separate from Valle Verde, which could mean that it's something entirely separate, not even intended to be in the game at all. Where the church is a stand-in for the Garden of Eden and a Holy Land, I think this area is supposed to represent hell, or at least some kind of hell. It's here we see a forsaken soul trapped in this hell, constantly being punished by a burning blade, being repeatedly drove through the body of the disfigured entity. This is called by the captions, the betrayer's fate, with the belly of the earth bearing those who were daggers in life. The betrayer meaning the betrayer of God being sent to hell, which is commonly portrayed to be within the core of the earth. Now the final hidden detail I'd like to talk about is the pages found in Matthias' house. Initially I just thought these were random scribbles, but looking into the name on them, of course it wasn't. I mean, I don't even know why I initially overlooked this. They come from a collection of art done by Benjamin Solari Paravicini, an Argentine visual artist. He was well known for his seemingly supernatural abilities to predict the future and portray it in his work. A notable drawing shown is this one with the Statue of Liberty, detailing the 9/11 attacks on the Twin Towers, which at the time of the game's creation was not something that had occurred yet. The page reads, "The freedom of North America will lose its light. Its torch will not shine as it did yesterday, and the monument will be attacked twice." The statue drawing in Paravicini's illustration takes form in the game too, being visible during the flying minigame. I can't find too much information on translations on what these all mean, but strangely enough a new one in part 2 appears. It only has a title which I think, in English, is "The Exploding Sun is Coming." The image is a cloaked figure with a large scythe. You're a big kid. I'm sure you can understand what that depicts. Alright, I think that about covers the finer details within the series. So now I'm going to share what I think has happened and where the series is going. Valle Verde is a game created by a company called Onyxware in collaboration with the Japanese Institute of Science and Technology. It introduces new specialized hardware to the PlayStation that's either incomplete, corrupted, or a combination of both. The Institute was responsible for creating the TH-Brain system, as we can see their logo during the Tharsis startup. The system must be designed specifically for Valle Verde, in the same vein as something like the Donkey Kong drums for the Donkey Kong Konga game, an add-on that enhances the player experience. It seems to be a multifunctional entertainment device, allowing the user to store outside media that can be played back, as well as emulate other PlayStation games saved onto the device. Valle Verde itself is not just a game, but a player hub or complex interface that allows you to meet other people from around the world. The TH-Brain system is able to generate new tasks and missions for the player to complete by themselves or with others to add value to the base game. The one thing that isn't easy to explain at this point in the series is the ulterior purpose behind the TH-Brain and how exactly it works. What can be said about it is that it copies the mind of the user and uploads it into the game's database, as evident through Matthias and the other kids that reside in the town. Why it was designed to do this, and why they need them in the game, however, is not clear. Knot says he hears their desperate pleas for help and mentions a ceremony the kids were a part of. So it's definitely not for something good. I'm not 100% sure, but I think the reason the other children are distorted and semi-absent is because they got consumed by the translucent bug in the fog area. So maybe they were intentionally fed to them to satisfy this Exodia looking thing, who knows. The current investigation on the game takes place on February 14th, 1997, and is being conducted by Robert and Pablo. Pablo seems to be the guinea pig using the device, while Robert likely stands by taking notes and overlooks the safety of the ordeal. The biblical inclusions of the game, whether intentional or not by the developers, are an insight into the upcoming events in the story. Twice there's discussion of a divine doomsday occurring. The first comes from the painting scene, where it says, "He who witnesses their actions will see justice fall upon their wicked days. But he will not be the only witness, judgment of judgments at the end." The second, more in-your-face reference is the television program that plays itself in Matthias' house at the end of the second part. It talks about how when man turns wicked, God responds in suit to wipe out the unrighteous.
If we take, for example, the days of Noah, in which the wickedness of man was great on the earth, we can see this relationship of chaos very clearly. Whenever the chaos of man rises, the chaos of God intervenes. And so, the righteous wrath of God fell upon humanity in the form of a flood that washed away the fetid atmosphere of sin that engulfed the earth.
It then shows a meteoroid landing onto Earth and an angel rising from the impact. Along with that, there's references of war and acts of terrorism in the game, the area of Wrath having the Oppenheimer speech, the plane minigame dropping packages onto the island, and the 9/11 depiction included in the level. All of this leads me to believe that there's another Judgment Day coming soon, due to mankind's exponentially growing wrath and destruction of itself. The goals of the people responsible for Valle Verde clearly have seen the writing on the wall and made it with the intent of doing something about it, but the methods again are just not clear yet. Why there's sentience and awareness past the comprehension of even the AI controlling the game is also not very well understood or elaborated on yet, but there seems to be some type of theme of religion versus science within the series. We'll just have to wait a little bit longer to truly understand the purpose and goals of Onyx Square. I think you can already tell by this point, but I think this is a great series and has a lot of future potential. I mean, I could not gush enough about the animated sequences within the videos. The coloring and the retro graininess on them really sells that nostalgic feeling to it. This isn't to say this is the only part that looks good, however. The whole game looks authentic and believable. I like allusions to the Bible as much as the next guy, however I think the frequency of them and how in your face it goes about them could be toned down just a bit. I think with 2 entries, with one of them being 20 minutes and the other being 25, I feel like the story should have definitely been more developed than it has been by the end of part 2. Though I could be wrong in my analysis and just missed a lot of the stuff, so if that's the case, disregard that point. Once again, the production value in Valle Verde is great and deserves all the love the community could give to it. So you already know I'll be leaving links to that in the description. Even if you watched this video, it's a rare experience that you can only receive by watching the videos itself. As always, if there's anything you would like to see me cover, leave them in the comments below and let me know what you think of Valle Verde. I also have a Discord now, so you can also use that to leave suggestions or just talk to me. But that's about all I have for you today. As always, I hope you have a great day.